Hi, Malian! I can't
Lisa!
believe I'm in Vermont and you're on the big island of Hawaii where the festival's going to be. It's amazing. Virtual reality is truly here.
And it's amazing that, you're on the easternmost coast of the United States, and I'm on like the westernmost, and you're in the north, and I'm like all the way at the southernmost point of the US, and like between us, we're broadcasting over, the entire nation. This is
That's right.
cool.
Sending these energetic waves of connection over the entire states united.
Yeah, I think I just want to like settle into that vision and kind of set an intention for what we want to do with this call and um, hold some space for the opening of blocked energies and just allowing the flow of care where previously that flow has been blocked, and creating a nurturing space where healing can occur, not just between the locations where we are in the United States, but all over the world.
I second that intention. Thank you. And the
Mm.
healing of the earth and of all its creatures is truly our own deepest healing. So
Mm.
let's work towards that in every moment.
Mm. All right. Namaste. Let's do it.
Thank you. Let's do it. So,
Okay. Well, mhm.
Malian, I am so honored to get to be brought into the Circle of Trust for this festival. And I really look forward to attending. I look forward to helping organize it and to see it blossom and grow over the years. And I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about why you started the festival and what your intention is for it.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm excited too. And I think you can kind of see that the meaning of the festival is about a gift of a positive vision for how we can move forward in a way that really deeply respects ourselves as beings and deeply respects our potential as spirits, and um, that we can enjoy and have a lot of fun. A long time ago, I read this book called Temporary Autonomous Zones by an author who goes by the pseudonym Hakim Bey, which is a Sufi name. And I love the idea of temporary autonomous zones because in it, Hakim Bey talks about bliss being one of the most difficult things for us to conceptualize in our culture. And um, having an autonomous zone where you temporarily get to make all the rules and create a bliss zone is something that's sort of surprisingly taboo. You wouldn't think that happiness, joy, excitement about life, all of those things would be so hard to talk about in our culture. But the sadness is that this culture tends to think that pain and suffering and anger are more real than happiness and bliss and love. And it's really just about choices. So, what are your priorities as a society? And this, like, I just get so excited and I start to giggle when I think about the festival and what I want to give through the festival because I'm like, oh, you guys don't even know what a good surprise you're about to be in for. And you're going to come here and there's going to be things to delight your soul and you're going to hear nourishing words that give you relief and comfort. And you're going to eat food that supports your body and you're going to hear music that makes you want to dance and express your joy. And the surprising thing is that this isn't what we're doing all the time every single day. To me, that's what's really weird.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. We get, and what I think is so amazing about having this festival on the big island of Hawaii, where literally a volcano is creating land as we speak. So this is the primordial place of creativity, and anyone who comes to this festival will get to really bathe in the energy of that primordial creativity, which is the beginning of making a different kind of world with a different kind of alignment focused on joy. It's the beginning of making that possible. So that's just what I've been sharing. And again, I'm so excited and grateful to you for being so generous and so nurturing and open-hearted and sharing your land in this way. It's a potent vision and it's a selfless one. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
I guess what I see happening is that the new paradigm is about realizing that being selfless and nurturing your neighbor, your friends, your family, your partner is really, or even people that are diametrically opposed to you, giving them some nurturance um, is really a form of nurturing yourself and taking care of yourself. I mean, ultimately, it comes back. So this is the new way of living, and this is where we're all asking the world to go. And every little bit kind of gets us there, a little closer to the goal.
That's
So
right.
it's really, really, really fun to see birthing and have all these beautiful um, midwives and partners to bring it into the light. And um, I have this friend Bridget Malloy, who's the head midwife at Waimea Birthing Center on the Big Island, and she was talking about. I think she posted something on Facebook about the number of people who see a child when it's born. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
you come out and all these people are there, excited to see you, and they were waiting for you.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it's so fun. So I want to talk about harmonized cookery and this journey that you've been on because I love your story. I think it's a beautiful story. It's epic and it's inspiring. And so I just wanted to kind of start at the beginning. What was the beginning of this?
Well, looking back, and again, I'm only 35 years old, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of looking back that happens over the rest of my lifetime. But as I look back now, I see that this journey with whole foods, nourishment, and healing started from the time I was a very small child. Something that you and I have in common, Malian, is that we're bicultural human beings. And for me, as a white person, that means that I am both from Kansas and on my mom's side, and from Italy on my dad's side. And I acknowledge all of the privilege that comes with, these European cultures and colonialist cultures in the United States. have created some hierarchical structures of privilege. They've also generated structures of racism. They've also contributed to the industrial food system of today, which takes people's food sovereignty rights away from them. And often these people whose land and food and seeds are grabbed are people of color. So I just want to acknowledge that in my work as a whole foods educator and through everything that I've learned in my lifetime so far, I see that the core of this work is about dismantling racism and creating a society that's structured both on joy and on equity, equity for everybody. You know, even if that looks like lifting up one group that's traditionally been oppressed a little bit more and asking another group, like white people, to kind of simmer down to create that equity, that's what it's about, and that's where it begins. So I'll just say that much. And when I was a little girl growing up in Italy, um, my grandmother taught me so much. You know, she would send us out into the forest, all of us cousins, all 18 of us, to forage for berries, to forage for mushrooms, and she'd say, you know, don't come back until you have both of these baskets full. And so we took that really seriously, and we'd go out and we'd forage for these things, and we'd come back and we'd prepare, you know, healing syrups and compotes and jams and store them all in her root cellar. And this is really where this journey began. And one of my cousins is adopted. He was adopted from Brazil, from an orphanage there. And he was and still is the only person of color in our town of the Dolomites of northern Italy, where Italy meets Austria. So you can imagine that for him, that was an extremely challenging upbringing and is still not an easy life. And at the same time, you know, we all sort of banded together and saw each other as completely equal. And where our equity came from was food and this collective effort to bring in food for the winter, use food as medicine to keep a really powerful teaching from the beginning of my childhood. Um, I also have a childhood sort of marked by different traumas that are physical in nature, but also have emotional and spiritual repercussions. And the first one I can remember was having an allergic reaction to nail polish, where I had an edema at age 4. And the doctors were really mystified by this, and essentially they said, well, this child's heart stopped, so let's keep her away from all pharmaceutical medicines so as not to risk any kind of event like this ever happening again. So basically, even more so than before with my grandmother's influence and the influence of the plants, um, my family started using plants as medicine and food as medicine because they couldn't administer antibiotics to me. And so that was once again the blessing of illness, right? And that's very much my story and the story of so many people on the planet is illness and how to find the blessing of illness, how to heal, and then how to turn that blessing into authentic wisdom and share it back out to others so that they too may be healed. So after my childhood in
Wow.
Italy, I came to the United States. I came to Kansas, where my mom is from, and that's where I had the great honor and pleasure of meeting Malian. And Malian and I went to high school together. And what a wild experience that was. You know, looking back on that, I realized I had a mom who was raised with the stockyards in Kansas and a dad who was raised hunting for venison and, you know, walking up the road to the farmer's barn to milk the cow or raising his own goats or raising capons. And these two cultures coming together, diametrically opposed, you know, an intact whole food system and a fractured industrialized food system, my mom and my dad coming together to create my brother and me, this is where the healing sort of begins. And so during my time in high school, I didn't really understand the implications of the food system that I'd come from and the food system I was entering into. But the more I started traveling around the United States, the more I started to realize that the food system truly was broken. And so I started getting really interested in finding out about where are the places that are, still thriving on the North American continent with the indigenous people who were there before the white European colonialists came. And so I found Taos, New Mexico, I found Santa Fe, and I found the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, and I did part of my study abroad in college there, um, and lived there and learned about the power of language to create reality and the power of food to sustain reality and the power of spirit to emanate that reality and that healing throughout the planet. And after living on the Navajo reservation, I had the great privilege to travel to Bali and study in Indonesia. And I lived there for 8 months and was so inspired by all of the learning that took place that I decided to start a fair trade Indonesian textile import business. And what that allowed me to do was keep going back to Bali, which is all that I really wanted to do, to keep absorbing this animist culture, this group of people that believes that everything is alive and everything deserves to be revered and honored as such. During my time there, I contracted amoebas. I contracted intestinal parasites, and I didn't really realize it until 4 years after the fact. And when the parasites went chronic, I had no idea what was going on. Stress had overtaken my life. I was working a full-time job as a business consultant and an over full-time job starting a cafe and music venue here in Vermont. And I crashed. I totally crashed. My body just started emitting warning signs like a fire alarm. I was in such a state of inflammation that I lost 40 pounds. I couldn't digest any of my food. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't keep any of my jobs. I was constantly starving, but I couldn't nourish myself. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Thanks to the intervention of a shaman, actually, of Choctaw origin, I learned that I had parasites. And as soon as she said that to me, of course, it made perfect sense. So then I spent the next 2 years taking antibiotics. This is a person who's never taken antibiotics in her whole life. And they really felt like poison. And they only made the situation worse. They just cleared out my whole digestive system and basically cleaned house for the amoebas to live and really thrive and have me as their host. For almost 10 years, I harbored these amoebas. And once again, I had to set aside the antibiotics, the chemicals, the pharmaceuticals, and get back to food as medicine, get back to my roots, the ancestral foods with which I was raised, and that is what healed me. As I was on the path to healing, I gained enough strength to travel to Ecuador, and I once again had the great honor of going to another equatorial climate, just like Bali, where people deal with amoebas, with these intestinal parasites all the time. And I got to work with a plant medicine doctor there, Juan Uyuncar, who administered ayahuasca, the vine of Banisteriopsis caapi, to me 10 different times during 10 different all-night ceremonies. And through that, I was completely cleared of my parasites and then continued to rebuild and maintain a parasite-free environment for my system. So after this whole journey, and after I continued to gain strength, I could do nothing more than take this blessing of illness and again turn the blessing into authentic wisdom by helping others heal themselves with food as medicine, What does that mean? It really just means returning to our roots, returning to the source of our ancestral foods. So that's helping to provide equity because it's creating a system where people are in touch with themselves, they're in touch with their roots, and their food isn't coming from really far away. And it's creating an empowered system where people aren't going to the doctor or to the emergency room every time they have a cold, but they're knowing how to make ginger tea or how to crush garlic on their toast or make garlic honey and heal themselves with food as medicine. And I am now so amazed to see where my journey will take me next.
Yeah, I'm so excited by your story because what it really um, what it really uncovers for me is the resilience of these types of knowledge. Like during the so-called Enlightenment of Europe, that was really like a scientific, rationalistic takeover, where it was like, if I can logically deduct something from a piece of evidence, then it's real. And so much of biology just doesn't work like that. Biology is spontaneous. Biology doesn't work on a rational cause and effect type of mechanistic um, system. Biology will surprise you. It will always surprise you. And so it just kind of speaks to a rebirth of our connection with our biological nature that's done in a systematic and methodical and reasonable way, but it's also based on relationship and observation, not imposing our human assumptions or our human worldview upon the rest of the world, but just being open to what is here. And to me, it's like, wow, the Christian colonization of Europe happened through destruction of all of these cultures because of this rationalistic idea that all of those cultures were lying about things, superstition um, and sort of charlatanism, like, people just fakery, that it was all fakery. And, going through that epic human cycle and then coming back to now, we're learning that the belief systems of indigenous people that were put down and considered irrelevant and wrong by the Christian colonizers um, are actually incredibly valid and scientifically valid. That all these goddess-based cultures and these matriarchal cultures of Europe had a lot of empirical knowledge that they were using to take care of themselves. And at the end of the day, we're really talking about the end of that trajectory of imperializing people by putting them down, like colonizing people by devaluing what they know and who they are. And I think that we can see how even today it's happening in the corporate world. Oh, well, we have all the money, so we're going to devalue people who don't have money, or we have a narrative that makes us valid, and you don't have that. So, we get to colonize you and take your sovereignty over your own body away. We get to tell you what foods you're going to eat and not eat, and you don't get a choice, or so on and so forth. We're going to tell you how you earn money. You don't get a choice. Now you have a student debt, and you're never going to get out of it, kind of thing. And and reclaiming our power to observe and to heal ourselves and to learn from the ancient cultures um, is really about reclaiming our human sovereignty, our right to say, this is how I want to live. This is how I need to live. I need to live in connection with nature. I need connection with, herbs and ferments and um, and spirit, and it's sort of, you know, it's sort of this weird awakening that, you know, people have to come to terms with that cognitive dissonance of like, that's what, you know, witchcraft is. There's still that element out there. That's, you know, that's satanic. That's that's not normal. And to really stand where we are and own it is to say, actually, this is historically the most normal thing that there is. It's totally natural. You want to put it under a microscope and, you know, do a gas chromatograph of it and make sure that it's scientifically valid. Go ahead. That's fine. You know, we're all for that. But honestly, I don't have to do that in order to validate where I'm coming from, because it just works. And let's reclaim that and just get the stigma out of, you know, just doing what makes sense.
That's right. And not being afraid to do what makes sense, which is trusting our intuition, right? And I think that stretching out the nature and the concept of time in order to create spaciousness, even in a moment, is going to be a huge way of helping people shift that paradigm of thinking from the very reductionist thinking of, you know, the spirit is fake, the spirit is charlatanism, so we have to push that out in light of rational thinking and creating space for all of it, creating space for both and saying, hey, if I'm always thinking into the future and getting anxious or reflecting on the past and getting depressed, I'm not in this moment. I'm not being present, and I'm not able to live in conjunction with spirit, in conjunction with nature. I'm not able to absorb and appreciate the bigger picture. I'm not even able to take time to cook for myself because I need to constantly be filling moments with distractions. So this shift in thinking and being able to appreciate and absorb and honor and respect indigenous knowledge really starts from a place of self-respect. And when I love myself and respect myself first, I say, well, I might not be a multi-million dollar interpreter at the UN, even though I speak 5 languages, but at least I have time to cook nutritious food for myself and grow it in my garden and share that food with people who don't otherwise have access to it. And that is gold. That means more to me than a salary. And that's a huge paradigm shift as well.
Yeah. And you know what you're talking about too is really about receiving love. If we're constantly hurting ourselves with our thoughts about the future or the past, when are we going to open to the present moment and allow ourselves to be nourished by what's there and to give ourselves permission to be loved and to be shown that we deserve love? And um, and to make that shift for every single human being in the world um, means that we can create a world of bliss. I think it's really
Starting at the
interesting.
festival.
Starting with this phone call.
That's right.
Yeah, because I think it's really interesting that in Kansas City a few years back, I was at a medicine Buddha initiation with Lama Lobsang Halden, and he was once the abbot of a monastery in Dehradun, India.
Wow.
And he's now married, he has children, he has a beautiful family. He was doing this initiation, and he was talking to us about hatred. Hating people is very wrong. It's really bad for your health to hate people, and it's also just unethical. You shouldn't indulge in that. And somebody raised their hand and they said, what if you hate yourself? And he was like, no, what? No, what's that now? Like, come again? You did not get that concept. They
Right.
don't have in his culture that doesn't exist. And he had to have it explained to him. And he was
Oh
like,
my
yeah,
God.
that's wrong. That either. Don't do that. It's just if we send love, if we commit to sending love, not just to others, but to ourselves, then that's what our world will be full of. And I think that one of the things that is so healing, to me, is to realize that you do recognize what white privilege means. You do recognize that there was a hierarchy that was created, a supremacist ideology that was imposed upon people, and that it's wrong. And at the same time, I think it's time for us to just stop that narrative where it is and say, guess what? The indigenous worldview is to always send love. And that was the indigenous of Europe as well as the indigenous of every other part of the world. Just send love. And if we can just do that and remember that, it's like the forgiveness is always there, the healing is always there. We just have to tell the truth about the situation, and then we can allow ourselves to receive that love. And to me, even in Hawaii, I wasn't born here. I'm not an indigenous Hawaiian. I own property. Like, these are totally um, structures. Owning property is a structure that was not inherent in the Hawaiian belief system. And I can't dismantle that on my own. I can't dismantle that today. I can't change our culture, right now. And maybe I could if I really believed it, but like, I need a team like to move forward with me. And but what I can do is to connect to the love. When I meet Indigenous Hawaiians and I spend time with them, um, whether it be in farming or in music or spirituality, but to connect to the love that to them is the primary thing to pass on. Because once we do that, everything else is automatically going to resolve around that strange attractor, that vortex. And, then suddenly the system starts flowing, the energy starts flowing, and we realize that if we just make that the center of our experience, it's going to shake out and it'll be okay.
That's right. Absolutely. And returning to love is healing that cognitive dissonance that you were talking about, that dissonance that is, the day-to-day life of so many people today who can't figure out, there's something that's not quite right. And it's that disconnect, right, from our own hearts and our own sense of love and that indigenous inherent truth, which is that we are all love. And I couldn't have said it better myself that, as you say, it's like when we make ourselves vulnerable and speak the truth, whether it's by saying, yes, I have white privilege, yes, I have internalized racism, yes, there is an institutional hierarchical structure of racism, and exposing that, it helps me to heal it. It helps to level the playing field for everybody involved. And it then allows people's hearts to open and to melt so that we can all move forward from a place of love and from a place of mutual respect and understanding. But while we're trying to, like, stay in our mantle, right? Stay in our coat, stay in our personality instead of dismantling and unveiling and revealing and making ourselves vulnerable, when we're stuck inside that mantle, then nobody can see us and there's no access to the love. So what's the point of that, The more we start to think about it and talk about it, the more we realize that the institutions that are set up currently to keep certain structures in place and to keep a very small group of people, frankly, kind of unhappy with a lot of money, it's not productive. It's not fruitful, you know. It's
It's
wearing
a
the
fear-based
cloak.
way
Yeah,
to live. And that's the irony of it, that if you are fear-based, or if I am fear-based, and I think, oh, I know what I'll do to protect myself. I'll just make sure that everyone else stays subjugated. They won't have any power. And that way they can never hurt me. And I work on that and I create that and I maintain that. Technically, I've also made myself into a slave of that system because it has to be constantly recreated and maintained. And so I can never separate myself from that system and just go have fun, like have a nice walk in the park. You know, I'm in the park, but I'm like, oh, what if they get out of their subjugation? I have to maintain that. Oh, you know what happened? You know, and I have to, you know, have the gears turning all the time. Whereas if I'm like, you know, subjugation's really boring. I'd like to be free, and that can happen if everyone else is free and healthy and has what they need and autonomous. So let's just empower everyone with what they need and give them the skills and the nurturance and the care that has to happen for them to be peaceful, loving, stable human units that sustain themselves, and they won't give a damn what I'm doing. They either way, and I can have fun.
that's right. Absolutely. And it's amazing, right? Once again, I'm like a total etymology freak. And so I think about words and the power of language to create reality. Like I learned on the Navajo reservation, like I learned in Ecuador, like I learned on Bali. And I think about that word subjugation, and it means being under the judgment of someone or something else. But who has gotten under that judgment? It's the yug, and it's actually a Latin word, but as many words, it traces itself back to one of the 13 original vibrational languages, which is Sanskrit, a language that creates reality that's indigenous to the Indian subcontinent. And that word yug means union. It means to join. It's also the root word for yoga, and I wonder why yoga seems to be so popular and also yet so strangely devoid of spirit in so many contexts, right? We're trying to heal this cognitive dissonance. So beneath the subjugation of getting squashed by the judgment is just the union. It's just the love. It's the yoking together of our spirit selves and our personality selves and the world, which is who we truly are. We come from the earth and we return to the earth. And that's the basis of reality. And that is the love. It's literally spewing out of the big island where you are right now. And I can't wait to be back there because it's just vulnerable. It's right there. It's so powerful, it's so primal, and it can't be subjugated. It can't be placed under judgment. It is purely creation. It is purely love.
You gotta think, you know, if I'm focusing on something enough to subjugate it, that means I'm totally obsessed with it.
I love
I'm
it.
not like I'm totally focused on it. You know, I'm like, oh my God, this thing I spend all my time on. And it's just a weird, thwarted way to express love. And what if we just legalized expressing love in this universe? And we're like, yeah, we all love. If we hide it, if we express it in a weird, thwarted, you know, dysfunctional way, it's still there. That doesn't change that. And so why don't we just express it in a wholesome, pure, um, you know, structurally sound way that builds, since it's there anyway, since we
That's
can't get
right.
away from it.
Right. Might as well. Might as well.
It's easier.
Free your mind.
Yeah, and the rest will
That's
follow.
right. And it's so cool
Well,
to
this,
think that mindfulness really is about freeing your mind. So being full of your mind means that the spirit is full and the spirit is
yeah.
filling the mind so that there isn't any space for those subjugating, obsessive, errant thoughts. But there's only love.
Yeah. I love that we are. I love that we're having this talk.
I'm so grateful.
So, me too. But I wanna thank you, and I want to invite you to a future talk. We can have a talk which brings more of us together in January, so that we can share our perspectives
That sounds
and
wonderful.
share that with the Mauli Ola family.
Thank you, Malian.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, for getting all the technical challenges sorted out this morning. And you are definitely one of my angels. I really respect your work and I respect your journey a lot.
Likewise, you're one of my angels, and I'm so impressed with all that you do, and I look forward to being together.
Yeah. All right. Lots of love, Lisa.
Lots of love. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.